Welcome into the Michigan State Hockey Hub. If this is your first time joining us, please just remember to like and subscribe to this YouTube page. It doesn't do anything more than help it get in front of other people's eyes. So it does us a big, big favor. And this week, I've been trying to talk with our guest here for a while to nail down the perfect time to do this comprehensive primer to the season, if you will, just a long season preview where we go over everything. And those don't know our guest here, Bott, he is probably the hardest working man in Michigan. If you follow him on Twitter, and if you don't, you need to, you'll see this guy at every sporting event in the entire city. So, Nate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. This time of year, when hockey and high school football intertwine, that's when you'll see me at high school football games, also tweeting out who scored MSU's goal.
Yeah, it's incredible how much you work, and I kind of feel bad for you. I don't know if you've ever taken a vacation. It doesn't seem like it, but
I get my free time. I'm good.
Yeah, so we are happy to have you on today, just so everyone knows what this is going to look like. We're going to go through the line chart from the first game, which was an exhibition game. We're going to talk about that briefly. If you want a more in-depth look, I did a podcast on that on Sunday. You can check out on the YouTube page. We are then going to go over every single new player, freshman, transfer, everything. We're going to walk through the schedule month by month. We're going to touch on all of the recruiting that's been going on and all of the discussion there as well. So this is your one-stop shop. This is everything. So sit down, get a drink, pause it, go get something, because this is going to be a long show, but it's going to be a lot of great information. So we'll go ahead and dive in. Nate, this is the line chart. And those of you on Spotify, I suggest watching this one on YouTube if you can go to YouTube, because there's going to be a lot of visuals. This is the line chart from Saturday's game. As we look through it, and we'll kind of go line by line, and I know you and I discussed offline, this is going to be different this upcoming weekend against Bowling Green, and we both know that, but for the sake of discussion, let's just kind of talk about this as it was on Saturday. What was maybe a few takeaways that you have?
Yeah, well, certainly I think it took a little time for the lines to kind of gel. Obviously being the first time playing against, other competition. I'm not really sure how much will really change heading into this Friday. Maybe some shuffling here and there throughout the game. But from Saturday's game, one line in particular, that third line with Tiernan Chowdy, Nico Mueller, and Justin Jalen. Nightingale described that line as kind of a dog with a bone. And they were pretty relentless, particularly in that third period. That second goal comes from, Justin Jalen really aggressive on the second forecheck, forcing a turnover. Mueller able to funnel the puck to the net, and then Tiernan Chowdy's able to be there and finish. So, but they were pretty relentless, especially on the forecheck all night. Nightingale really praised Nico for being, a really smart player. He's really good at the dot too. So I think that line showed some promise, and I think it really speaks to the depth that I think that's going to be maybe the biggest difference for this year. Last year towards the end with Lewandowski out, it was pretty much Mindorf, Tucker, Davidson. They were carrying the weight, and you didn't get a whole lot of secondary scoring. From Saturday, you got a goal from your fourth line, you got a goal from your third line. I think just the overall depth, there's going to be a little more offensive push from some of those lower lines.
And Mueller's a guy that I really like his game, and he's been a sound defensive player, and I've always thought there's more to him offensively. And I thought on Saturday night, he looked a little bit more polished, to me at least. He looked like maybe there's a little bit of potential in there to put up a few goals this year and help distribute on that line. The line I really like is that second line. Eric Middendorf is just a smart player. And I always thought last year he impressed me in so many facets of his game. But with Dubinsky in the middle there, centering that line with Jeremy Davidson, Dubinsky wins a lot of faceoffs. He won over 52% last year. Off the top of my head, I want to say he was like 8 for 12, I think, Saturday.
Yep, right on the money, 8 for 12.
And Jeremy Davidson, we all know what he can do, and he showed that Saturday as well by scoring a beautiful goal. So I think that second line could stick together, and I really like the potential that it has.
Yeah, certainly. Like you said, Dubinsky really good in the faceoff circle, and I think you could kind of tell Middendorf and Davidson, they know each other's games. They've got a full year under their belt playing on opposite wings on the same line together. So I think maybe you might see some shuffling there. You might, move Dubinsky up, move Tucker down, just because you saw that Tucker did pretty well with Middendorf and Davidson last year. But hey, we'll see. But yeah, that line was pretty good.
Yeah, right now Tucker's on that first line, and you're going to have to help me with this name. We talked about this offline. There's some confusion on how to pronounce the new captain's name. Do you mind saying it for us?
From my understanding, it's Mukha.
Okay, so Mukha's just transferred over, grad transfer from Lake Superior State, getting the C, which we'll talk on briefly here, and Tanner Kelly centered by Jesse Tucker. I like Tanner Kelly's game. If anyone listens to this podcast or any amount of time, I talk about how I like him. He just does the dirty work that you need to be done, and I do think there's some offense in that game as well. What do you think about Miroslav getting the C on his jersey after just coming over? Were you surprised?
I was a little surprised, sure, but he's been playing college hockey for a while. He was an alternate captain at Lake State. He's just he really seemed like he came in and commanded a lot of respect right away. That's something Nico talked about before the exhibition. How important he's been to really getting the new guys, gelling with the guys who've been there for a while. So it was a little surprising to hear at first, but after talking to him, after talking to some of the players and Adam about him, it's becoming a little less of a surprise. It certainly seems that he really came in and took control and really been helping the guys out.
Yeah, and we touched on that third line, Shouty, Mueller, and Jalen. I think that does have some offensive potential. And like you said, overall the depth is just a little bit better, in my opinion, than it was last year. Jagger Joshua on the fourth line, Daniel Russell on the fourth line, and Carson Dorwart centering that line. What were your thoughts that you saw? I know that Dorwart scored. Russell, to me, really stood out, the freshman. I thought that he looked really good for a freshman in their first game. Any thoughts on the fourth line?
Yeah, I think he was pretty impressive. He had a shorthanded opportunity there in the third too that Trey Augustine was able to stop. But yeah, I think you could tell a little bit, especially on that goal. You could tell that Russell and Dorwart played a full year together. I think they kind of had a little bit of understanding and reads from whether it be on the ice. Russell was able to turn there, keep control, and Dorwart found the open space. So. Yeah, I was pretty impressed with that line. I think adding Joshua to it, Joshua's really fast, going after loose pucks. You can certainly forecheck well. He's a big body. Once he gets the puck on his stick, it's really hard to get it away from him. So I think if that line continues to gel, it could produce a little bit for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving to the blue line here, we have Cole Krieger and Michael Underwood, who we will talk about more once we jump to the next segment. But I noticed both of the Krieger twins coming back now for what seems like forever, right? They have the COVID year that they could use. Cole Krieger, I noticed one time when they got past him, off the top of my head, there may have been more, but I thought both of them looked a little bit maybe more nimble than last year. Did you notice anything particular from the Krieger twins?
Yeah, I thought they kind of they settled in for sure. I think in the first minute, Gabe Perreault had a really good chance that came off a Krieger turnover. But, you saw there in the third, Christian Krieger at one point goes end to end.
Yeah.
Cole Krieger with about a minute and a half left found himself in front, and Joshua from behind the net found him. That's a grade A scoring chance that somehow Augustine was able to get to. That would have tied the game with about a minute 20 left, I believe. But they were pretty good moving the puck through the neutral zone. I think, you have two freshmen there starting. You have Underwood, who's obviously a new guy coming in. So I think it took a little time for some of those pairings to gel a little bit. But as the game got on, having a newcomer paired with a guy who's been here, I think overall, by the third period, they seem to be working pretty well.
That second D line, Nash Niederhaus, Victor Kurtig. If you watch this, you may have said, "Oh shit, who's number 3?" He kind of stands out there. He's a big body, 6'6", 190. He obviously, anyone with that size on defense, you're gonna say, okay, we hope he can kind of become a stay-at-home D man who can push some bodies around. And he had a bad turnover at one point. It was his first game in North America, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were your takeaways from his first game?
Well, like you said, yeah, he certainly stands out. He's a big body on the ice. I think as he continues to play, he'll continue to get better. He's really an offensive kind of defenseman. Yeah, like you said, that NTDP fourth goal was a pretty bad turnover from him, and of course it falls to the first line. Will Smith and Gabe Perreault there on a 2-on-1. He ends up trying to dive to stop a pass and wipes out his own goalie. That's why you play exhibition games and you learn from your mistakes. And I think he'll settle in a little bit. I'm interested to see how often he cracks the lineup. David Gucciardi missed the game. He was out with an illness. He's still 50-50 on coming in to play this weekend. Then you obviously got, I thought Matt Basgow played a pretty good game. And then Paul Connor will obviously be pushing for minutes there too. So it'll be interesting to see him going forward, how much he improves and how often he cracks the lineup.
Yeah, that fourth line, familiar face, Christian Krieger and Matt Basgow, who's a freshman, who we will get into shortly. Goaltending, Dylan St. Cyr, Pierce Charleston. I wouldn't say split. I mean, I guess you could say split, kind of. I think St. Cyr got 2 periods and Charleston got the third period. I think Charleston had 4 saves and no goals allowed. And St. Cyr, I think, what was it, 4 goals against?
19 saves, 4 goals allowed.
Yeah. Any takeaways from those two?
It's been a battle, all off season here. Both those guys are going to be competing for starts, and I think it was probably a little bit of a breath of fresh air for Pierce, only having to face 4 shots in a period. He really didn't have to do much, particularly in the last, 12, 13 minutes. I don't think he recorded a save. I think all 4 of his saves came in the first 7 minutes. So, he was solid, didn't let anything up. St. Cyr had a handful of pretty remarkable saves, particularly in that first minute, the one on Gabe Perreault, breakaway. He put a really nice move on him, and he was able to flex his pad out. 2 of the goals really not his fault. I mean, the fourth one where he gets taken out, the second goal on a breakaway by Will Smith, which, you look at Will Smith, he might be the best player on BC if you put him there now. So that's obviously a tough task. I think if you ask him, he'd probably wish he'd have that third goal he allowed back on a really almost a 90-degree angle. That was Oliver Moore, the Minnesota commit. Just put one right up over his shoulder. He probably wish he had that one back. But overall, pretty solid for a first appearance.
Yeah, and, I think we're all pretty familiar with Pierce Charleston. I think that it's going to be a good tandem. We'll see how much of a split it becomes. And I was saying this on Sunday's show. We really don't fully know. Maybe you know more than me. I don't talk to the coaches and players like you do, obviously. But we haven't seen Adam Nightingale coach multiple games. We don't have a sample size to really say how quick is he to change lines, how quick is he to pull a goalie or switch goalies, or how often will he do this, that, or the other. We don't have the sample size, so we will just have to wait and see. I don't want to get into predicting that type of stuff. And so just to kind of recap the game, anyone that missed it, very quick recap. Michigan State did lose 4-3. It means literally nothing. DeWard had the first goal, Shouty, both freshmen. Davidson with the goal as well. for the little time that we'll spend on this, let's hear what you thought about the national team and Trey Augustine, who is a commit to Michigan State, recently flipped from Michigan. And there's also an uncommitted guy I want to touch on after we hear your thoughts on Trey Augustine.
Sure. Yeah, Augustine was pretty fantastic. He, especially in that third period, you know, he allows 2 goals, but I mean, he was all over the place. There's a number of chances, especially in that third, where, you know, I feel most goalies in NCAA, you know, might not be able to get to that.
Yeah,
he was really good, and you know, hey, he got the chance to experience playing in Munn before he gets there. You know, even when he got announced as the starting goalie, it was, you know, you get the student session with the "Who cares, you suck" chant for every player that gets announced, but when Augustine comes up, that wasn't really there. It was almost more applause. So
yeah.
But yeah, he was really good.
Yeah, there's a couple of those like point blank saves that I think once or twice. If anyone wants to see the highlights, I put out a video of some saves of his on Twitter. You can find that from Sunday. And there's a few like behind the net, distributed right out in front of the net that he just stopped. That to me, it was like, wow, that's a lot to do for someone his age and experience against a college team. I thought that he looked comfortable. Of course, he wasn't flawless, but the other player that we want to touch on is Gabe Perreault, who is uncommitted, was on the top line, number 4, if you were able to watch the game, did score the game-winning goals, kind of a tap-in goal from him. Also had a really nice opportunity early in the game, forehand, backhand, stopped by St. Cyr. Anything that you noticed about Gabe Perreault, the potential first-round draft pick once he gets drafted?
He was impressive. That whole first line really was impressive with Smith, Leonard, and Perreault. All 3 of those guys are probably first-round draft picks. But you could tell, you know, if he were to come to Michigan State, he'd be immediately one of the better guys, one of the most skillful guys.
Yeah.
You know, he had a little bit of experience playing with Nightingale with the U18s towards the end of last year. Didn't play overseas because didn't have his passport, but got a few games under his belt under Nightingale. So, but yeah, he was impressive. Really, that whole first line for the NTDP was really stood out. I mean, I think that's another big takeaway from the game. You know, it's a loss to the NTDP, but you know, you look at who they gave up the goals to. The best players on the NTDP, they weren't allowing, you know, 4th line or 3rd line to really get involved that much. So I think that's another important angle to look at. You know, it's the best of the best who are beating them, not anyone else. Sorry, my apartment buzzing right now.
Oh, no, you're fine. So let's go ahead and dive into the incoming transfers. And what we're going to do here is we're going to touch on each one. A lot of their stats, information will be on the screen. Again, if you're on Spotify, check over on YouTube. And we'll kind of talk about what you could see their role being. And I know we've kind of touched on some of these guys already, but Justin Jalen, forward, came over from Brown, grad transfer, 94 games, 27 goals, 15 assists. That's 42 points. Was an assistant captain and second team all Ivy League last year. Do you see him as second, third line type guy, or how do you see his year playing out?
Yeah, I think I see him as a 3rd line guy. You know, he plays with a little bit of relentlessness. You know, he's a really good forechecker. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Loughran from last year. Yeah. The little bit we got to see of him, you know, in terms of his frame and in terms of, yeah, he's got to work a little harder because of it. And at the same time, he'll probably take less penalties than Loughran, but he's a little more disciplined. But yeah, he's a really smart kid. And yeah, I think he'll be a factor. I'm not sure how much really involved in goal scoring he'll be, but he'll certainly be able to put a lot of pressure on opposing defenses trying to break out.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you know, year 1 of whatever you want to call this, rebuild, whatever you term is fancy floating around Twitter these days. improving on the edges is kind of step one, right? And I do think he has a little bit more scoring touch than some of the other players that we saw on the third line last year, which, hey, if you're improving on the edges, that's a step in the right direction. Zach Dubinsky, if anyone wants to know more about him, we did an interview with him. Great guy this offseason. You can find that on the YouTube page. Transfer from RPI, career 66 games, 12 goals, 20 assists, 32 points. A face-off guy, 52.6% win percentage on the face-offs in his career. We saw that, as we touched on earlier in the show, this past Saturday. Zach Dubinsky, what do you think?
I think he's a pretty good center. And I think if he's able to stick on a line with Middendorf and Tucker, Middendorf and Davidson, he'll certainly get his chances to score some goals. I think he's really good in front of the net. He's got a quick stick that, he'll be able to get to some rebounds and such, and and just even deflections. Just being in front of the net. Don't know. Haven't seen that much of him defensively. I know he did have a couple shifts Saturday as one of the penalty kill units, but Nightingale ran out about 5 or 6 different forward groups there. So I don't know if he'd find a role in that regard, but I think overall he'd be a good second or third line center.
Stepping up the captain here, Miroslav Koci. Say it again for me, Nate. Muka. Sorry, it's gonna take. I was saying that and Dorwart are gonna take a while. I don't know why I'm struggling with both of those names so badly, but the grad transfer from Lake Superior State. Now this guy has some size, 6'1", 197. You kind of noticed that the first time we saw him, and he comes with experience, something that this team needed. 104 career games, 18 goals, 39 assists for 57 points from Slovakia. What did you take away from him Saturday? What do you think his role could be, and do you see him sticking on that top line?
I certainly think he's a top 6 guy on this roster, first or second line. He's a really smart player, and he's got really good vision. I think he'll be setting up quite a few goals, particularly on that second power play unit where we saw him on Saturday. He's obviously experienced with over 100 games. He's got leadership experience from Lake State, also with the national Slovakian team. He's just an overall really solid player. Probably arguably the best transfer that Nightingale was able to come in, and obviously he had some experience with him playing at Shattuck St. Mary's when Nightingale was on staff there.
Ryan Nolan was kind of the extra forward, extra player. We could not fit him into our graphic. There's only so much room on this screen, but he did get some run on Saturday. I did not notice him much. I'm not sure if you have more on him. He's a transfer from Merrimack, grad transfer, 46 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. Did you notice anything from him, or can you tell us more about his game?
Yeah, he had his first shift about midway through the first, where I noticed him a little bit. He was working on the forecheck. A little bit of a long shift, almost 2 minutes. That's where I noticed him most. I didn't notice him much more going forward after that. Didn't get on the ice that often on Saturday. He's a grad guy. He's a really good locker room guy. All the guys seem to love him. He's a good guy to talk to. I think that'll be more of his role. I don't know how often he'll really crack the lineup, depending on whether Nightingale wants to dress 7 defensemen or, if a guy like Kyle Haskins or AJ Hodges or Gavin Best, if one of those guys, perks up a little bit in practice and maybe fill in his role as an extra forward.
Michael Underwood, who we saw number 22 on that top line, a grad transfer from Northern Michigan. He also joined me for an interview this past summer, and he just seems like the nicest guy. He was so happy, just awesome guy to talk to. Check out that podcast. 129 games played, 5 goals, 13 assists for 18 points. And we knew this offseason, after we saw all the transfers and the Krieger twins status up in the air, we were looking at the blue line and saying, first off, can they really fill out a roster? Second off, they have really, really little experience. They landed Underwood. The Krieger twins came back, and the level of concern went down a little bit. He was a +7 in 2021, 2022. A guy who played under Mike Towns, an assistant coach of Michigan State now. How do you see his role this year with the Spartans?
Yeah, first off, he's a grad from Clarkston. Where Towns
Clarkston, I'm sorry. Yeah, I had that wrong on the screen here.
Yeah, he's a good puck-moving defenseman. He's smart. He's not going to make a whole lot of mistakes. He's not going to provide a bunch of offense like a Sassana did in the past, or Nienhaus or Gucciardi might this year. But yeah, he's really solid defensively. He's not going to make a whole lot of mistakes. He had one penalty Saturday that was, a little questionable, but probably something that he could have avoided. But other than that, I think he's probably one of the most solid defensive defensemen that they'll have this year.
When I was making these, there's a lot of information on here, and I knew I was going to screw up somewhere. I did not expect it to be as obvious as the previous school, but we'll move on to the addition of goalie after Drew DeRitter transferred out. Dylan St. Cyr, Quinnipiac, you may know his name from his days at Notre Dame, a grad transfer, 46 games played, 26, 14, and 3, 10 shutouts, a career .927. A smaller goalie, 5'8", 167. Last year, 10, 2, and 1 with a 1.16 goals against average and a .936 save percentage with 5 shutouts. Do you think that this was one of the better goalies that they could have got or that was available on the transfer market? To me, it was, hey, this guy comes in with some experience. He's played against some big-time programs, and he's put up some good performances as well. I was very pleased with the addition.
Yeah, in terms of goalie transfers, he was probably up there as one of the top most sought after guys in that. Obviously, a ton of experience. Notre Dame for 3 years, so I think that's certainly an advantage when it comes to Big Ten play. He's familiar with the way that these programs operate offensively. Didn't get as much time at Quinnipiac. The other guy there kind of really took over, and but hey, he returns back to Michigan. That was really important to him. Talking to him about where he wanted to play his final season, and I think him and Pierce Charleston will be battling throughout the year, and I would expect to see both of them get a number of chances in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to move on to the freshmen, which we saw a lot of on Saturday. Victor Hertig, we talked about him quite a bit to begin. He comes over from Sweden. He was a 6th-round draft pick in 2021 by New Jersey, 6'6", big body. We've already touched on him, so we're going to move on to Matt Basgow, who is a guy who I'm pretty high on, honestly. A funny stat I found about him is he only took 10 penalties in 125 games played, which is something that, not to mention any specific names, has been frustrating in the past with defensemen at Michigan State taking penalties. A little bit smaller, 5'9", 179 pounds. I think he's a pretty good puck mover. He can play kind of both sides of defense if needed. How do you see Matt Basgow fitting into the Michigan State team this year specifically?
Yeah, like you said, he's a good puck mover. He's disciplined. He's pretty solid defensively. I think something that might surprise a little people is he has a lot of skill. When he can get really moving in the offensive zone, he'll be able to start some breakouts and he'll be the one bringing the puck to the zone, and he can really make some plays. I think that might be a pleasant surprise for some Michigan State fans. I think doesn't have as much maybe offensively as a guy like a Dennis Sasana did.
Yep, that's
But he
exactly what I was
definitely,
about to
but he
say.
definitely has some of that capability in him, especially being a smaller guy. Um, but yeah, I think he overall, all around, he's going to be a pretty good piece on that blue line.
Yeah, because right now there's not as many players like a Dennis Sasana who can kind of bring the puck in and have some creativity. And I guess the way I would say it, just to put it in simplest terms, is when Dennis Sasana had the puck on his stick, I was confident, and I didn't worry too much when he was entering the zone or kind of moving the puck around on the power play or whatever it may be. And I'm glad to see Matt Basgow comfortable there, and he'll grow into that role, I'm sure. So a good replacement, not one for one, not the same skill set, at least not yet, but somebody with the ability to do that or grow into that role is
Yeah,
huge.
we did see that on Saturday too. With Gucciardi out, he was the
Mhm.
point man for that second power play unit.
Yeah.
Um, Nienhuis was on the first one, but I would expect probably Gucciardi to fill in one of those two. Um, but yeah, that's a lot of confidence from the coaching staff to have an incoming freshman be the point on one of your power play units. We saw it last year with Gucciardi, but we're seeing it again this year with Basco.
Tiernan Shouty, someone who Jeremy Dewar was really high on, and when I talked to him last year, or excuse me, I guess it was earlier this year, Shouty is on the third line during that game on Saturday. Like we mentioned, scored a goal on kind of a rebound, just right place, right time, crashing the net. That's what we love to see. Did play with Tanner Kelly. He's 5'9", 176 pounds. Last season, 48 games, 12 goals, 14 assists, 26 points. We touched on this a little bit. In my opinion, I want to be careful with my words here because I don't want this to come off as a slight towards anybody, but just a little bit more offensively skilled player than what we've seen on the third line recently at Michigan State.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think the biggest thing, just talking to Tiernan, this is a kid who's been committed to Michigan State since his freshman year of high school. So he's been he's been waiting a long time to get here, and I think you kind of see it a little bit in the way he goes about his business, both on and off the ice. He's extremely excited to be here, and I think that that adds a little bit, to when he hits the ice, the amount of effort he's going to give. So, his goal on Saturday was a little right place, right time. But again, I mean, that whole line, they seem to be working really well together,
Yeah.
and he seems to fit right in.
Daniel Russell, who comes in, he actually, like I said earlier, was one of the players that stood out to me on Saturday. Last year in 61 games, 21 goals, 23 assists for 45 points. His father, Kerry, played at Michigan State in 1987 through 1991. Russell on the fourth line Saturday. I know we've touched on him. Could you see him as somebody who, if an injury happens, he's kind of one of the first guys to move up the line, or do you think Jagger Joshua will get a chance? And I know those are not concrete lines. Let's put that on record here, but just from what I saw and just the offensive ability he has, I could see him as somebody who could get a chance at least on the third line, if not even work his way higher if there's some injuries.
Yeah, Saturday showed a good amount of skill. I think he's a really good 5-on-5 player. I think he's really good at identifying, when to make a play and when to maybe play it into space. You look at that goal. He could have just dumped that, down behind the net, and your forecheck could have started. Instead, he pulls it back, sees what he has, finds the open guy, and it leads to a goal. So, really good hockey IQ. I think, really good 5-on-5 player. I could maybe see him working his way up if maybe an injury or maybe someone's underperforming a little bit just to change things up. But I think I'd be confident in saying he's a regular in the lineup.
Yeah. Gavin Best, did not see him on Saturday. 6'2", 180 pounds. Was the captain of both his hockey and golf teams in high school. Numbers from last year: 59 games played, 20 goals, 34 assists for 54 points. coming into this season, in the offseason, I talked to a few different people about some of these recruits, and he was a name that kept coming up as a player that they liked. And I don't know if why he was not in the lineup Saturday, if it was just a numbers game or what, but do you see Gavin Best playing a role this year, or do you think it's more of a wait and see with him?
Yeah, well, he certainly has the frame to play collegiate hockey. 6'2", 180. He's just really strong with the puck on his stick. Good forechecker. I think it's a little bit of a wait and see. There could have been maybe a brief time in the offseason where he was injured or maybe just a little behind in terms of other players, but I certainly think there's definitely a possibility of him cracking into the lineup, and I'm sure probably during this this non-conference there might be some opportunities where Nightingale and the staff maybe kind of, hey, let's plug this guy in and see what he can do in a game. So certainly there's certainly always a chance that you could find a role, but yeah, I think it's a little wait and see for now.
Carson Dord, who we saw on the fourth line last season, 61 games played, 9 goals, 16 assists for 25 points, played with Daniel Russell in the USHL. And we saw that connection, and we're talking about it again. Russell peeled back, waited perfect amount of time, and it was a great shot at the end there. He stood out a little bit. I didn't think like, oh my gosh, this guy may be, something special, but again, improving on the edges. This fourth line looked a lot better than fourth lines that we've seen. Again, 1 game sample size. Don't write this down and put it in concrete or anything, but I was impressed. What did you think of his game?
Yeah, I know technically the stats for this game don't count officially, but whoever had Carson Dorwart as MSU's first goal scorer on the year, give yourself a pat on the back. Yeah, he was pretty good. I think you saw that chemistry with Russell. Playing a year in Sioux Falls. We're going to see going forward. How much more he improves. I think playing on a line with Joshua, if that stays as is, I think that'll be only beneficial to both him and Russell. So he stood out a little bit for sure. Obviously, a really well placed shot above Augustine's right shoulder for MSU's first goal there on Saturday. And hey, it is only 1 game, but it's a breath of fresh air when you get 2 freshmen, scoring, in their first game. So, excited to see them going forward.
Anytime you work in small sample sizes, I think the main takeaway is not how many goals did you get or, oh, let's do some type of on pace for it. I think it's just showing that you have the ability to do something. That shot that he showed on Saturday was kind of a whoa. That wasn't just some lucky, he wasn't kind of looking, just threw it towards the puck and it trickled in. That was a skill. Mm-hmm. And seeing that, even if it is small sample size, you saw something that he can do that, in my opinion, a lot of players in college hockey can't necessarily do at that level as a freshman. So again, the freshman really stood out to me as just a lot of times when we say this all the time is it takes time. Everyone you talk to, when you talk to these players, it takes time. Whenever I interview them as, oh yeah, freshman year is a lot of learning, a lot of catching up to speed. But we've already seen some skill flashes that I did not expect.
Yeah, I mean, you can even take a look at last year. Look how long it took, Jesse Tucker to get a goal. He had plenty of assists, but it took him a while to get a goal. It took Tanner Kelly until the Ohio State series at home to get his first goal. Now you got 2 freshmen already coming in and making an impact right away. At least in terms of goal scoring production. Like I said, a breath of fresh air.
So that recaps the new additions to the team. I'm sure everyone noticed the departures, so we will not get into that. Next, I want to look at the schedule, and we'll start off with October. We already checked one off the list. Coming up this weekend is the game against Bowling Green at home. I will be there in East Lansing for that game. If anyone sees me, please say hi. I promise I'm a nice enough guy, so I'd love to chat some hockey with anybody. That's going to be a home-and-home series. So that Saturday game will be at Bowling Green. I'll also be there in case any listeners are there as well. You have UMass Lowell the week after. Now that's a Thursday, Friday. And then you have Long Island, kind of a newer team. And then you see the first bit of Big Ten action when we have Notre Dame on the road. Quite a few home games here to start. Any takeaways from October, and especially if you want to touch on anything against Bowling Green?
Sure. Bowling Green was pretty good their opening weekend. There's plenty of people out there who have Northern Michigan ranked towards the bottom of the top 20. And Bowling Green, I think they scored 9 total goals, but they won the Saturday game, 6-4. There's, it'll be interesting to see. I think certainly it's an opponent that Michigan State and their staff expect to beat at home, certainly, and probably, get a result on the road. Then you look at Lowell, from last year, that was both games on the road against them, and it was a tie and a loss, I believe.
Yep.
Lowell's a pretty solid team. I think this might come down to a little bit of home ice advantage, and again, we'll have to see after this opening series really how the lines are going to form and how the team's really going to gel. And then moving on to Long Island, shout out former Spartan Adam Goodser, power play goal in Saturday's game for Long Island. But that's a series where Michigan State should sweep, and they should sweep fairly handily. Dropping a game to Long Island isn't going to look very good in pairwise. So I think that's an important series in terms of, the pairwise rankings and, especially a little bit of confidence, heading into obviously Notre Dame, top 10, top 15 program. You got to start off your Big Ten play on the road against them. That's a tough task.
Yeah, and as I look at this, the UMass Lowell, and this is a little bit off topic, but are they doing this now? I noticed with the schedule, the Thursday, Friday games, is that just when they have a Michigan State football game at home on Saturdays? I kind of noticed that with the schedule this year, and we'll talk about it more, is if Michigan State's at home, they've kind of pushed the games to Thursday, Friday. They did not do that in the past. Do you know anything about that? Has that been discussed at all?
They've done it occasionally especially when TV, kickoff times certainly matter and stuff. I know the Lowell series, that is because it's the homecoming game.
Oh, okay.
So I think with all the homecoming festivities for football, they just did Thursday, Friday. I don't know too much about it. A lot of it is with just like TV and time slots. So
as somebody who has to convince my wife each weekend to let me watch Michigan State hockey, I am all for the Thursday, Friday thing. That's a lot easier for me. So I love it. But yeah, this October schedule, I could see them getting off to a pretty good start, kind of like what they did last year, right? They got off to a good start. They played Lowell, and they played them hard, and they showed that the team had maybe a little bit something. Now, of course, it faltered towards the end once they got into the Big Ten play. But getting a taste of that Big Ten at the end of October will look good heading into November, where they have Wisconsin at home, Ohio State at home, and there's a lot of home series that first, month and change. And then a tough match going on the road to Penn State, and then on the road to Miami, Ohio, which is a game I'll be at least one of those games. That's about the closest Michigan State hockey gets to playing in Kentucky. So I'm going to make my way up for one of those games as well. Do you think before we get into November piece by piece here, do you think that the slot of this many home games in the first month and week or two is good, or do you think it's going to bite them in the end?
I think a little bit of it depends on the results. If they come into that Wisconsin and Ohio State series both at home, and they maybe take 6 points from one and 4 from the other, and they're really actually positioned to maybe compete this year, Yeah, I think it might come back to bite them a little bit having so many road games at the end. But I think overall, in terms of just the program visibility, you're going to have all those home games early on. That's going to get a lot of attention to the program. And overall, that's a good thing for Nightingale and his staff, and certainly in building a culture and building a program for the future.
Any edge you can get in the beginning of the year, each year I feel like the first few games are sloppy, it's difficult, it's a lot of penalties, it's not a flawless product. Especially with this many new players coming in, getting these home games early, even if it gives them a slight advantage, I think it's good. And maybe as they gel throughout the year, they'll be better suited to play some of those tough road matchups. We look into December, you have against Minnesota and against Michigan before playing Ferris State in the GLI tournament on the 27th and 28th. This is going to be a tough month, even though it's a short slate of games, obviously, with the holiday break. This is kind of what happened last year, right? They were doing fine, got into December, we're still doing pretty well, and then it just kind of went downhill. This is a tough month right here, and I think it's good in terms of just scheduling. Minnesota's going to be difficult. Of course, Michigan's going to be difficult. Even if you get through those games and it doesn't go as planned, I like that they have 2 weeks to kind of regroup after those two tough matchups and get ready for the GLI.
Yeah, you look at last year when, doing pretty well, you get to GLI and you play really, really tough against Western, ultimately fall, but then you go and beat Michigan Tech in overtime. That seemed like that was maybe like, a little wind under their sails to carry some momentum. And then obviously, a couple injuries and everything kind of just, fell off the rails. But yeah, Minnesota and Michigan, the two top teams in the Big Ten. Probably Minnesota 1, Michigan 2 in my eyes, but it's going to be a lot of skill to handle. You're probably going to need to have one of your goaltenders stand on their head for one of those games to really survive. So, but it'll certainly be interesting to see. I think it's probably a positive that they get out of Big Ten play before facing Minnesota. You get that series against Miami that you can kind of maybe reset, try some new things to really prepare for a 2-week gauntlet.
Yeah, no, I agree. Going into January, I don't love this either, honestly. But that's the nature of the beast. Where they are right now in the Big Ten, it's similar to what some people might say, like in SEC football, where it's like you're looking at the schedule and it's like, man, that's tough. Then the next week it's like, oh man, that's tough too. That's just how the Big Ten is right now. There's a lot of good hockey programs, and Michigan State's on the path to proving that they deserve to be in that discussion and working their way up the rankings. So you go at Ohio State. I think I'm going to that series as well. That's not too far from me, so I'll probably be there. Then you return home against Penn State, and then on the road at Minnesota. But notice that week off in between Penn State and Minnesota. I like that. I mean, in terms of Minnesota is just one of those teams that when you go to Minnesota to play, larger rink, everything, having a week off beforehand, maybe to get healthy, maybe to regroup, to catch your breath before you go there, I think is great.
Yeah, I think most importantly is you get 2 weeks to practice, to one, really, really practice on figuring out how to play on that Olympic ice. It's considerably larger, a lot more space. And obviously Minnesota likes it, skill and space seems to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
But you get 2 weeks to really, I think, look at what they do. I think just the whole scouting is going to be so different for Michigan State this year when you'll have a dedicated film room where the entire team can watch film together. I mean, you think last year they're basically, their film sessions took place in their player lounge. It's a place where players are supposed to relax, and then all of a sudden you have a coach with an iPad, telling you what you did wrong.
Yeah.
Here they're going to have a full team, and they can put video up. The coaching staff can walk through. The whole team's there. I think the prep and the scouting for opponents is going to be so vastly improved that something like a 2-week bye before heading into Minnesota could ultimately like change the results.
Yeah. As you head to February, it's kind of an interesting. We've seen this before, but the Friday Sunday game against Notre Dame, and then Michigan at home for a Friday Saturday, and then you have Wisconsin on the road to finish up the regular season.
Yeah, Notre Dame. The Irish play MSU. It seems like they play MSU better at Munn than they do at home. Yeah, I think I think that one year they went undefeated in the Big Ten on the road, or only lost 1 or 2 games. They're just a team that thrives on going into another building.
Yeah.
And that Michigan series, I believe that Saturday game is at Little Caesars Arena. The Friday game at Munn.
Okay. Is this the duel in the D?
I believe this weekend is the other.
Okay.
The first matchup with Michigan is just a home and home.
Okay.
And then, ending with Wisconsin on the road, I think, personally, in my rankings, I think Wisconsin is 7th in the Big Ten. So ending your season you got to go on the road, but it's against a team that I think Michigan State is certainly able of beating. So, to end the season and head to the Big Ten tournament, maybe with some momentum.
Yeah. All right, everyone take a deep breath. We're about 51 minutes in. We really appreciate anyone that's stuck around this long. We're going to get into something. I know we're talking about this year a lot, but a lot of the excitement around this program is not necessarily about this year. There is excitement for this year, but it's about the future. It's about the recruiting that we've been seeing. I think it's called Puck Preps this past week or two, put Michigan State's 2006 class. That is a birth year, by the way. I know some people were confused thinking that they were like ranking old classes. At number 4 in the nation, there's a particular player that we'll touch on that they have as a 5-star. The rankings that we are going off of is neutral zone, and we'll go through all the stars for that as well. But there's just so much buzz around recruiting right now. Nate, do you think it's the new coaching staffs approaching recruiting differently? I know there's a lot of talk about Mike Towns and Coach DeMichael. That's just, they're phenomenal recruiters. And obviously Coach Knights is a great recruiter as well. The facility updates, I mean, is it just the perfect storm? Because right now, even with the facility updates, I don't think Coach Cole would be able to be recruiting at this level. It seems like the new staff came in at the perfect time. It's kind of all meshing together well.
Yeah, I think, a perfect storm's a good way to put it. You talk about rankings. The Athletic did a poll with a number of, junior coaches and everything, and they ranked the best recruiters. And Jared DeMichael is number 3 on that list. So, he's a top-tier recruiter. He knows how to get the best guys. He's a former goalie, so, that certainly, I'm sure, affected, the way Trey Augustine went about his decision. Nightingale's been a lot of places. He's a guy who certainly cares about, doesn't matter first line or fourth line, he wants every player to want to get to the NHL, and he wants to coach them and operate this program like it's an NHL team. I think the coaching staff certainly helped. The facilities are, I think, the thing really driving it.
Yeah.
It's the new coaching staff's job to sell it, but I mean, you go from a facility that, their weight room in-house was really like a treadmill and a couple bikes for cool down and some weights. I mean, they would lift weights on the concourse at Munn. Yeah. If they wanted a full team workout, they were going to the football building. I mean, obviously it's a state-of-the-art weight room there, but they don't have one in their building. Now you have a state-of-the-art weight room that everyone walking by Munn on the south entrance can see through the glass and see really what they have. I think all of the facility upgrades. I mean, the locker room's great. The film room, you have video room where you can go in between periods and watch your power play, watch your shift before you go back out there for the second or third. You have obviously a shooting room. You have a steam room, sauna. You got underwater tubs. You got underwater treadmills, hot tubs. You have a state-of-the-art training room. All of it together is just, I think, going to continue to get kids interested. And obviously Michigan State is a program with a lot of history. So I think Michigan State as a whole, and as a whole sports, community with basketball, football, everything else, adding hockey into that, I think is just going to continue to get better and better players.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to see the upgrades on Friday. I've been thinking about it all week. I just can't wait to see it. I know that everyone has said that it's top of the line, and that's part of recruiting. That's a big part of recruiting, especially in college hockey, where it's not as much of the NLI and all that other junk that goes into football recruiting. But let's go ahead and go through the update. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go through these slides. There's quite a few players, so we don't have to touch on every single one. We're just going to pull up a slide. If Nate has anything to say about a particular player, all of the star rankings will be on there. All of their stats from the past 2 years, where they're from, stuff like that will be on there. So we'll kind of give Nate free reign to talk about whoever he wants as we look at the first group of players here. Any of these players in particular, Nate, that you know much about?
Yeah, Austin Orovets, he reminds me a little bit of like what Matt Basgow was going to bring this team. A little small guy, but he's a really good puck mover. He's got some skill in the offensive zone, sound defensively. He's with Green Bay now. I believe he was with Omaha last year. I don't know too much about Patrick Geary. I know he was the first guy that Nightingale committed. I'll have to see more I'll have to track him more and see how he does in juniors. And then Danilov also with Green Bay, kind of came a little out of nowhere from Ukraine, but was impressive enough at Green Bay's USHL camp for them to, put him on the roster. So obviously a good sign if, a guy coming from overseas is able to, play his way onto a team.
Yeah, this list, I should have mentioned this before. I am only going through the commits, the Adam Nightingale commits. So anyone that's currently committed under Coach Cole, I'm not going through. And it's not because I don't think they're all come or who's coming or who's not. It's simply due to time and the amount of time it takes to make these graphics. Doing that for all of them would have taken an extremely long time. So we're just going to go over the more recent commits, the ones from Nightingale. And these are from Jeremy Dewar's kind of recruiting spreadsheet, a really good resource to use. Of course, I'm going to link it in the description of this video so that you can check it out. Kind of some stats, projections, information about each one of these commits. Move on to page 2 here. I know that there's a more recent commit on this page, probably past 2 or 3 weeks. Anyone in particular here?
Yeah, Isaac Gordon, they committed pretty early on in the once August opened up. But hey, he's a guy from Canada who was going to play with Humboldt, and people at the Chicago Steel were impressed enough with him to put him on the Steel roster. So another guy who's kind of been moving up a little bit in terms of rankings. Showcasing some of what he can do at the junior level. Tommy Monisto. Just plays in Finland. I don't have too much info on him.
Yeah.
Then AJ LaCroix, he's off to a really good start in the BCHO with Chilliwack. That's former Spartan Brian Maloney, who finally MSU taps into that pipeline where they get a guy from Chilliwack where Maloney's been the coach for a while. So he's a top 6 guy in that team, and he's got a lot of skill. Absolutely.
A 4-star player. Really just, talk about just a terrible way to scout. I saw some clips on Twitter of this guy, and LaCroix looked, he definitely has some skill. That jumps off the page right away. The next group, you'll see this is a little bit further out. They won't be here as soon as some of the players we've talked about. But we've got a good group right here. A couple 4 stars, and Christian Humphreys is the player I was referencing earlier that Puck Preps has him as a 5-star, which really helps bump up the team ratings, obviously. Neutral Zone has him as a 4.25 star. Is he who you want to talk about in this group, or do you want to touch on these other players?
Well, I think among these 3, U17 NTDP kids, Humphreys is the one that stands out. But at the same time, for Baker and Van Vliet, they're on the U.S. team for a reason.
Yeah.
Very, very talented players, and for this staff to this past August 1st was the first day that 06s could be recruited and commit. And to think that they land Baker and Van Vliet on day 1, they land Humphreys, a little less than a week later. And I mean, Humphreys, first game with the NTDP 17s, he goes out and scores not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 goals in his first game. So, obviously a very impressive talent. Just a lot of skill really from all 3 of those guys. But Humphreys is really the name to 2 years from now when he's in green and white, he'll be one of the stars for Michigan State for sure.
Yeah, that number from last year, if you were wondering just how skilled he is, 54 games last year, 36 goals, 70 assists, all of these numbers thanks to eliteprospects.com. As we move on here, this group, we see another 4.25 star. And just to give you, if you all are wondering, like, okay, how good is a 4.25 star? What does that mean? It's a little different than like football recruiting and all of that, of course. I don't quote me on this. I'm going off of memory from years ago, but I think the only 4.25 star I can remember that came to Michigan State was Patrick Kodorinka. I think he was right at 4 or 4.25. When he committed. So that just gives you an idea of like maybe the type of tier of player. I'm not saying they're going to be like Patrick Kodorinka. I'm just giving you the idea of the tier when you get into that range.
Yeah, they had another guy, Carter Mazer, but he's at Denver now.
Yeah, and he's doing well. Yeah.
National championships. Frederick Deschennes, he's a really big body defenseman. 6 goals, 31 assists, and 38 games is pretty good for a defenseman.
Yeah.
He comes to the USHL. Ludwig, he was at some USHL camps. Ends up, he's going to play another year, honey baked. And then Riley Patterson, he's with North York and OJHL. He's a top 6 guy there for the U16 team. He's a really talented kid too. He's one of the most recent commits from Nightingale and his staff. But yeah, certainly another player that fans and people can look at and get excited about his eventual arrival.
Absolutely. And the last player on here we've talked about a little bit, so we're just going to mention it and move on here. Trey Augustine, the goalie who faced off against Michigan State this past weekend, a 4-star. Hasn't really played much this year just because we're doing this on October 4th. We need some more time. So I think I'm going to do another type of recruiting recap like this around the break in December. So maybe I can try to pull all the rabbits out of the hat and get you and Jeremy on at the same time. That would be the way to do it right there. But before we let Nate go back to work, because he's always working, and go to another sporting event this evening, we've got to talk about the one fun part of the show here, right? The bingo card. Everyone wants to play bingo, I'm sure. But so I created this bingo card just as something to do during the game. It's just a fun idea. And as I was creating it, I really didn't know how to create a bingo card. Like, obviously, you can't put all the easiest ones on one thing. You kind of have to space it out. And I was running out of ideas. So I just want to show this. It's on my Twitter account as well. I'll put it out before the game. Just kind of a fun way to stay engaged in the game. And of course, I said, Nate, I want to show you this before we record. Tell me which one of these is just ridiculous and what to replace it with. And he made the better suggestion of doing a weekend bingo card. So instead of just doing Friday night, you do Friday and Saturday night. So we're gonna play this year. If it ever hits, I'm gonna come up with something fun to give away. Maybe I'll buy some gear, some swag to give away from just some cool hockey swag or something. But which one of these? And again, this is a YouTube only thing, really. Which one of these do you think is the hardest one? And maybe if you could pick one that you think might not hit, or do you think they will all hit? Now I'm going to give him some time. I'm going to filibuster a little bit as he reads here. Just to highlight a few of them. Michigan State outshoots an opponent. MSU kills a penalty. That's kind of like a free one, right? In most games, you'll have that happen. A defenseman scores a goal. Freshman scores a goal. From what we saw Saturday, that would have been checked off. Eric Middendorf scores a point. That would have been checked off as well.
I can tell you one that will get checked off every single game. That's Jagger Joshua records a hit.
Yes. That's another freebie right there. That was one of the, man, I've got to come up with something to put here. And another one that I think might be difficult is where was it? Golly, I just saw the MSU records more than 25 shots on goal. That was a struggle at times last year. I think they'll be better in that category this year. That's why I set it at 25. I'm going to tweak this as well, like throughout the year. So like if it's oh man, this one's not hitting, this one hits a lot, or I'll make it a little bit more weekend specific sometimes. But
here's one thing I'd say. I would amend that 25 shots to 30.
30.
I think that this team, just the way that they operated Saturday, it's a completely different style, and it's a style where they're going to be faster and they're going to put more pucks on net. The differences were very noticeable, at least to me. You look at on the power play, the way that they broke into the zone with Middendorf. You have 4 guys breaking into the zone. You don't have 4 guys waiting at the line.
Mm-hmm.
One guy comes in, then everyone comes in. You got guys in cohesion going into the zone. You even saw that at 5-on-5. But it's so much more playing with the puck on your stick than playing a dump and chase type offense like Dan Cole had. Where you dump it in, you get a couple forecheckers. Hopefully you're able to get the puck back, and then you can set things up. This is going to be a defenseman breaking into the zone with 2 forwards on his side. You're going to have, 2 forwards going in. If it's a 2-on-2, you have a guy trailing in behind with the puck on their stick, and I think that's something that Nightingale's really been hammering down that philosophy to the guys, and it's definitely about, we mentioned this a little bit with Russell on that first goal, making a decision when to make a play and when to play it into space. There's obviously times where you're playing in the space where, you need a line change, or, you need a breather or whatever. Or you can see a guy going into the zone where you can dump it into space where he's going to get to it first. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, Russell had the opportunity there to just dump it behind the net and let Dewar go, try to retrieve it, and then you can hopefully set something up. Instead, he made the decision to wait, and he makes a play with the puck on his stick. It's a very different offensive philosophy, and I think offense will still be a struggle at times, just because some of the talent gap with some of the opponents that they're going to play. Yeah. It's going to be tough to score on Minnesota. They have one of the best goaltenders in the Big Ten, and they have probably 3, if not 4, all Big Ten caliber defensemen. It's going to be tough at times, but I think that the opportunities are going to be more ample. A lot of the previous offenses were those dump, forecheck, get possession, and then, you're tic-tac-toeing looking for the perfect play that is a grade A scoring chance, sure, and might happen, but, more than likely a defenseman's going to get his stick in somewhere, and, now all of a sudden you're going back to your neutral zone. It's going to be not quite as Penn State-ish, where Penn State crosses the blue line and shoots it. I think there's going to be a little more, play design and strategy, but I do expect the shots to be up and the goal scoring production to be up. And even just watching practice today, the brief glimpse I got, they were doing power play work. It's different, and it's they're funneling a lot more shots. They're getting a lot more sticks to the front. I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to be a 3-goal-a-game team, but I think with this style, it's more likely to potentially happen.
Yeah, I agree, and I think those are great points. Now, before we get you out, we have to do what every season preview show does, right? Pick a bunch of random stats to predict at the end of the year. That's what we do, and it doesn't mean anything, but we're going to do it. So I'm just going to do these rapid fires. I'm going to ask a question. Just kind of, shoot me an answer. We don't need in-depth discussion, just want predictions to put you on record. So when you're wrong, we come back at you at the end of the year, okay?
I think I'm losing connection here, so.
All right, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready when you are.
Most points on the team will be?
Most points.
Points.
Middendorf.
Most goals?
Davidson.
Most points by a freshman?
Shouty.
Most points by a transfer?
Muka.
Oh, okay. Most penalty minutes? That's a tough one. We got a few good candidates here.
Are we counting fighting penalty minutes? Is this just
yeah, you know what? Yeah, fighting as well. We'll put that in there.
Oh, Christian Krieger.
Okay, most starts in net.
That one could change on a dime, but I'll say St. Cyr.
Okay. Best face-off percentage at the end of the year.
That could be Dubinsky or Nico. I'll go Nico.
Okay. And we'll let you off the hook there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can come up with. Oh, how about this? Most improved player by the end of the year. This is so hard that if you get this wrong, though, I'm coming after you.
Let's see. I'll pick one forward and one defenseman for you.
Perfect.
I'll say forward. I'll say Tanner Kelly.
Like that.
He was pretty good as a freshman, but it took him a while to turn the his good shifts into production. On the stat sheet. I think he'll produce a little more this year. Defenseman, I will say Gucciardi. I think, if the power play operates, at a better rate and he's the guy at the point there, I think he could see himself with a good amount of goals and a good amount of points, at the end of the year.
What would you predict the final standings in the Big Ten to be at the end of the year?
Top 3, Minnesota, Michigan, Notre Dame. After that, I think 4 or 5 would be maybe interchangeable between Ohio State, Penn State. I would put probably Ohio State 4, just because Dobish will probably win Ohio State 3 or 4 games just based on his goaltending alone. So I'll put Penn State at 5. I'll slide Michigan State in at 6, and Wisconsin I will put at 7. Although I do think ceiling for Michigan State, I could see them leapfrogging Penn State and Ohio State.
Man, you heard it here first. We're clipping that.
I could see it, depending on really how the team gels a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I am predicting 6th. I'm saying I can see 4 maybe.
No, we stopped recording. No one heard that part of it. But all right, well, that's gonna wrap it up tonight. We'll let Nate get off a few minutes earlier. Hour and 15 is probably long enough. He's got to go eat some dinner before he gets to his next gig. So, Nate, tell the people where they can find your work, how to sign up for the LSJ as well.
Yeah, all my stuff is at lsj.com. I'll post every story I do to my Twitter, which is at Nathaniel_Bott. That's also where I will, post any, breaking news about, recruits or anything like that. And then, yeah, you can, some of my content will be behind a paywall, but, I appreciate if you pay for my work. I put a lot of time and effort into it, but, you can just write on lsj.com. There's plenty of options to subscribe. And, we do a bunch of deals where you can get 6 months for $1, get 3 months for $1 here and there. There's a lot of opportunities to get it for pretty cheap. So again, lsj.com, Twitter. And then, I'm at every home game for sure. So, if you see me come down from the press box to redeem my concession voucher, feel free to say hi.
What's the go-to concession item that you'll enjoy during the game?
They upped it for us to $15 this year. So
Adam Nightingale's the best, man. He does everything.
Before I'd go with the soft pretzel with cheese, and then I'd grab it used to be $10, so I'd get the soft pretzel with cheese, and I'd grab a bag of peanut M&Ms or something. It came out exactly at 10. This time I can maybe grab 2 bags of candy or get an extra hot dog or something. So
that's what you think. Next thing you know, those prices are going to go up.
Yeah, sure. Probably.
All right, Nate. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us. Hope everyone's looking forward to the season like we are. Thank you so much. Again, if you could just like and subscribe to the channel, that would do so much for us. And we'll see you next week.